Hey everybody, welcome to our 4th anniversary series of the Double Stuff podcast. Yay! Where we're double the hosts, double the topics, double the fun, and I'm Sarah.
I'm Charity.
And I'm Alan.
I'm Dan.
So yeah, like we said before, this is our 4th year. This is officially our 4th year podcasting. We've already made it past the 200 episode mark. Technically season 21, so there's a whole lot of numbers going on there. So we started doing this back in 2020. Here we are 4 years later.
We need some cheering sound effects in the edit.
We do.
Need to add those in.
Some fireworks in the background and everything.
Huzzah.
Yeah, so since we've been doing this for 4 years, I guess that technically makes us seasoned professionals at this point, right?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. So on top of our regular podcasts, the ones that we do, I was curious, and I think we talked about this before, if we listen to other podcasts, ones that either similar to ours or just drastically different, but also looking at the statistics and kind of information about how podcasts kind of got its name and some really cool stats and stuff. I was just curious, do our show kind of fall within that, and have we reached those expectations? Sort of, kind of. So I think I gave Charity like the origins, or the part of the origins that I had looked up about the podcast.
This is true. So podcasting has been in existence for over 2 decades, but it first gained popularity in the early 2000s, with the term podcast being a combination of iPod and broadcast. So that kind of ages it right there with the iPod term. But in 2004, an article for The Guardian, Ben Hammersley first used the term podcast to describe the emerging trend of episodic audio content that can be downloaded and listened to at the listener's convenience, and the term stuck.
There you go.
Yeah. So even though iPods, I still have mine, even though I don't think it works anymore. But the term, it's just stuck. So
I don't think when I had an iPod, I don't think I even thought of the concept of podcasts. It was just for music. I think later when I got like the fancy iPod, you could put movies and stuff on it, but I don't think I ever had a podcast on my iPod.
Never had a fancy enough iPad, the iPod video.
Yeah.
I didn't have one of those.
Yeah.
And I don't remember actually ever listening or even downloading, I guess what's considered a podcast or audio episodes at that time. That was still a bit of in its infancy, at least for me.
I had audiobooks, but that's not the same as a podcast.
I'm trying to think of the first podcast that I listened to. It's probably Kevin Smith's podcast, but it was on my BlackBerry.
Yeah,
I had to load.
He was in there.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff did he talk about?
Random stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember Larry the Tech Guy? He was one of the first podcasts too, talking about This Week in Tech.
I remember This Week in Tech. Yeah. Twit.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
They had a great setup. When they went to video and they had like their sets, they'd like move around and stuff. It was really cool.
Very cool.
Are they still going on? Or
This Week in Tech, I think so.
Question. I don't. Yeah. Okay. Well,
I think they do. I think they have a few of their like signature shows still.
Yeah,
that they
definitely.
do. I don't know if they do like the whole 24-hour thing like they used to do, but I'm pretty certain This Week in Tech still does their stuff.
Yeah, it was a good, because that was a radio show, and it seemed that the first podcasters, I mean, they were set up for it. They just basically downloaded their tape, their recording for their radio show, and just uploaded it. Yeah,
that still happens sometimes too. I know, like a lot of talk radio nowadays gets put on there.
And vice versa. Podcasts will go onto radio.
That's a nice way to reuse your content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how I feel like maybe I was probably the latest to the game, just because I listen to old time radio, which I guess is like podcasting in the 1930s. But I still do listen to like the Jack Benny program and Fibber McGee and Molly and all those shows. But in terms, I guess, of modern stuff, like what Charity was, I guess both of you guys were saying, taking radio stuff and converting it to, it was actually a British show. I think they call it the Tiki Room, and it is I think it's like 3 guys, and I think they originally did like talk radio, and they would take their clips throughout the show and make a 15-minute block of stuff. And I started listening to that about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And that's kind of was like, okay, maybe I can do this, because they just took little bits and pieces of something they already recorded, and I was like, that seems doable for me. So that's kind of my introduction to, I guess, the podcasting world. But that's funny that term, even though it's a bit outdated, I don't think it's going anywhere.
I mean, it's kind of like we talked about this before, the save icon on like a Microsoft. Yeah, like it's just become a regular part. Like it would be weird if it weren't there. Because what else would you call it?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, what else would you call it? It would just be like audio, or they'd probably just call it like an audio broadcast, and they would marry a two
audio cast or something.
Audio cast. They probably end up doing
Autocast.
that. Yeah. But that'd be like about cars. Autocast.
Yeah.
You had said earlier, like 20 years ago. In my mind, that's like still in the 90s somewhere.
Yeah,
I don't even think about that being in the early 2000s.
It's I'm teaching college students now that I might mention a 2000 reference and they weren't born during it.
Yeah.
Well, I was teaching in one of Sarah's classes as a guest speaker, and someone had a landline phone in the video that we were showing, and they were like, how come she's talking into a remote? Like, I thought it was a TV remote. And I was just like, okay, have we gone that far that like a landline phone
Are you serious?
Yeah, they were like, what is she talking into?
They were genuinely asking. They weren't being sarcastic. They were like, what is she holding? And I was like, oh, Lord, have we gotten to that point?
And it wasn't even one with like the little swirly cable. Like, it was an actual, just like a regular wireless, like a nice landline, but they thought it was a TV remote.
Just get like the really old school ones where it's like mounted on the wall and you pick up the, your piece talking to it.
They got those at the museum, or like what they call the candlestick phones, which looks kind of like our microphone stand where you pick it up and, talk on one end. Yeah, we should bring those back. That'd be great for texting.
And party lines.
And party lines. So, yeah, but anyway, I had some information too. So in terms of dealing with podcasting, what I like about it, and I think what has attracted a big audience, is dealing with the flexibility and accessibility of the podcast, because it's saying it offers a way to be entertained without demanding the full attention, so you can multitask and listen to it at the same time, accessible on computer, phone, all that kind of stuff. Because me, I actually like listening to it when I'm driving. At least when I'm driving short distances. If I'm going on a road trip or something, I need music, but just commuting from home to work or something in between, I like listening to it while I'm driving. Sometimes when I'm at home, like cleaning up or something, but I don't know. I guess
you do that, because the times that I've been over to the house, and it's weird. Like, I'll hear my voice or my laugh from far away, and I'm like, what is that? I'm hearing myself, and I'm like, oh, okay, Sarah's in her room listening to the podcast, but it's a really weird.
When you hear yourself,
we hear like this weird echo from another room.
I'm actually a ventriloquist. I can just throw it's weird. I even sound like Alan for some reason. So what kind of info you got, Alan?
I have entertainment and escape. So the experience of listening allows individuals to detach from their immediate surroundings and lose themselves in discussion at hand. Podcasts not only entertain, but also offer a reprieve from the mundane or stressful aspects of daily life, crafting an intimate space where listeners can laugh, learn, or simply listen at their leisure.
Or their leisure.
Or leisure.
If you're British.
If you're fancy.
But do you kind of feel that way too? I don't know how often you listen to podcasts.
All the time. And one of the things that we're probably in sort of like that sort of first wave where it's audio only, but now they're called podcasts and they're video productions. I mean, we're switching cameras, we're lighting, we're set directing. There's a lot of high production that goes into a lot of podcasts now. And it's from a broadcast, a traditional media standpoint view, it's pretty much writing on the wall as far as what people want, how they want to consume it, and people just like the variety.
Yep, that's true. That's so interesting too, because I think part of it,
it's cheap.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I was going to say. Is like early on, there wasn't like a lot of gatekeeping, right? I mean, there wasn't anybody could start it if you had a microphone and a computer to record and host on or from. But now you're talking about like lighting and video equipment and doing like more editing and stuff, and it's like, is the pool shrinking now? Of like people who are interested or wanting to get into podcasting because it's becoming more complex or more expensive.
Yeah,
I think it depends. Well, yes. But I think it also depends on who's doing it, because I see a lot of people, at least on YouTube, very well-known people, and they have their podcasts is actually pretty low budget. Like a lot of them don't really have full sets and lighting. Some of them do for sure, but even just the people I listen to sometimes, and they get millions of views, and they're just in their room.
Yeah,
they're just in their bedroom computer talking.
Yeah.
So I guess, I mean,
it helps if you're famous already, though.
Yes.
Because that way people want to watch you in your bedroom talking into a crappy mic.
Yeah. Because if anyone else has done that, it's just... But I don't know. Then I've seen some obscure ones that still get a lot of... I don't know. Maybe it just depends on the person, the content they're talking about.
Yeah, it's lightning in a bottle, like anything else.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I will say I would love to do something like that. I mean, it would definitely need more than just the four of us to do it, unless we're able to kind of like, secretly try to switch while we're talking.
I said before, it's a radio face.
Yeah.
It's right here.
No, I think I will
It's
say
radio hair, radio face.
I mean, there's some truth to that, but I don't know. I think Dan, you could be pretty dapper if you wanted.
Y'all want to start doing video? I'm gonna have to start shaving and stuff before coming in, like actually looking appropriate.
I have to wear decent
Oh
clothes.
my gosh.
Dan's got that perfect work from home look going on, and he doesn't want to have.
I
a
have
camera
perfected it over the last 3 years. So.
I mean, this is an honor because he actually puts on pants for us, which I do appreciate.
I know you left
That's
the
true.
house today, Dan. Thank you.
I did wear my comfy pants today. Though. Normally I wear like just actual real pants. And today I was like, no, I'm it's hot. I'm staying comfortable.
I'm not gonna wear real pants today.
I got my fancy yoga pants for home.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yoga pants.
That's what we need now.
Your wife's yoga pants.
Well, I have another fact too.
Go for
The
it.
majority of shows feature 2 or more hosts. This dynamic allows for diverse perspectives, engaging discussions, and a more interactive listening experience for the audience. Worldwide, there are over 504 million podcast listeners. That equates to 23.5% of all internet users. The number of listeners increased by over 40 million in the last year. So, I mean, the wave's still growing.
Yeah.
And
millions, so
the more accessible or I don't know. I still haven't quite figured out the end goal of Skynet. It sounds so ominous, but I mean, with the more connectivity that people have and the availability for them to access content, it's just going to keep growing. Right now, it's probably that would probably coincide with major metropolitan areas across the globe. But
yeah.
Well, kind of along with that too, you said that how many listeners there are. There are also 1.5 million active podcasts that those people are listening to, and the average listener of those, 4 million or something that you mentioned, regularly subscribe to and follow 7 different podcasts.
Yeah.
And then on average, podcast episodes ranges from like 30 minutes, sort of similar to like ours, to 60 minutes in duration. And that allows hosts and guests to delve into topics, engage listeners, and meaningful conversation.
Right. As growing up, I remembered like pretty much most people on average had sort of a diet of maybe 5 to 7 shows that were their shows that they would follow, and they enjoyed the story, the characters, and the content of it. So I don't know. I think that I've eclipsed the 7 podcast mark myself.
Oh my gosh, me too.
But
well, yeah, that's average. So what do you? What about 10, 12, 20?
Way more.
50?
No, I don't think I would go 50. But in between 20 and 30, I think.
Okay.
And
You mean the ones that you regularly follow?
yeah, and then of those, if I feel like sometimes I won't jump into them until there's a guest that's going to be there. Some people I just will watch just because I really enjoy the content of what it is they put out. But some of it's like what we were just talking about. It's the dynamic between whoever the guest is or whoever's going to be on the show with the host. And that will attract me. Like one of them for the longest time, I was a pretty diehard follower of Hot Ones.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, after a while, it's okay. I get the premise is the same every single time, right? So after that has sort of worn off, then you're just wanting to see how this particular guest is going to hold up to the hot sauce.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny because I sometimes, it depends on the podcast, but I sometimes don't like it when there's a guest. Because if I'm listening to a podcast, it's because I like the person that's doing it. And when they when they start bringing in a whole bunch of different voices of like, guests and, all of that, I'm like, skip. Like, I don't really care because I came here to listen to you, not all these other people you're bringing on the show.
I definitely have podcasts that I listen to that would encapsulate that. Hot Ones, the host Sean, I forget his last name.
Evans?
I think you're right. Sean Evans. He's very automatic. So it's almost scripted what he's going to say. It's very methodical. It's very... which I think is kind of comforting for the guests because you can almost guess the milestones by what it is that Sean's at. Now, he is a journalist. He asks really good questions of the guests. He really dives into the minutia of things that you wouldn't find in like tabloid websites or celebrity magazine websites or anything like that. But if you're just watching it for Sean, I don't know if that translates as well. You're really watching it for the guests.
I think it depends on the type of show that it started as, because like there are shows with like multiple hosts, that are just fun to listen to the host, and then there's like Marc Maron, which the whole show is an interview show, so there's always a guest, which is like similar to Hot Ones. So it'd be weird if there wasn't a guest on a Marc Maron episode.
Well, I think that's the format. I mean, because just maybe him on his own, maybe for 5 minutes or so it would be. But I feel like it's still like amongst friends. The friends are the guests. I guess that's how that works. I mean, they're in the Hollywood industry, but it is people that that, singers, performers, whatever. But yeah, I feel like for shows like that, you have to have a guest. I feel like it depends because sometimes you have shows where you have like 2 guests, and I feel like it gets a little bit chaotic when you have multiple guests on one show. I feel like when you have one, it works. It's like when you have multiple co-hosts and then one guest, or you have multiple co-hosts and multiple guests, then it turns into like a free-for-all, and it's like, okay, we're getting out of hand. So, I mean, we I guess we sort of kind of fit, at least in terms of having multiple hosts, because we each kind of co-host. So hopefully, because you, Alan, were talking about, after a while, you're like, well, yeah, that's a great dynamic. We want to hear what they want to say. Hopefully, at least for us, after 4 years of kind of really doing the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're kind of used to each other now, so the flow is...
Yeah, but hopefully for us, yes, but hopefully the listeners think so too. Versus, here comes another one, another one with those 2 weird girls and the guys that they talk to.
Well, on that note, since we're talking about listeners and stuff, I have some more facts on podcasting. Now, our episodes go out on Wednesdays, which I think when our first episode went out, it went out on April Fool's Day, which was a Wednesday, right? Yeah. So I think we just continued that trend for the past 4 years. But Monday mornings are the prime time for podcast listening because people are starting their week, and so they're starting off fresh with their commute to work, and so people like to listen to podcasts on the go. Podcast listeners are highly engaged, with 80% of them listening to all or most of every single episode. So this level of commitment shows attention and a unique bond between the podcasters and the listeners. So I've got some stats here. So 90% of people listen to podcasting at home, which I was expecting that to be the higher number. 84% listen while in the car, which is most of the time when I'm listening to one. 49% will listen while walking or just exercising. And then if you have a long commute, there's 37% of listeners listening to podcasts.
Those numbers don't add up. How does that make up 100% of the pie?
That's a good question.
The rest of them listen randomly, like in the bath, but they don't report.
Admittedly,
what about everybody on the International Space Shuttle?
Unless
back to work, guys.
Unless that's more of it. I think that grid. I think that was more of a United States bit of information in terms of worldwide.
I think it's just based on where they're listening. So like the at home, in the car, commuting. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. I will say sometimes I do listen to podcasts while working out.
Yeah.
I do
oh my gosh.
I do that as well. It's just something I've gotten used to, at least for a couple of years ago. I started doing that more often. Yep. So it's not,
Podcasts and audio dramas while working out helps take your mind
maybe,
off of
okay,
it.
I go to the gym really early in the morning, and I think because I go so early, I don't want anyone talking to me.
Not even the voices in your
No,
in your ears.
I don't want to hear any voices unless, absolutely necessary. So maybe that's why.
Okay.
I had some information dealing with like listeners and all that kind of stuff. So some more statistics. So it says of all the podcast listeners, almost half, which is about 47%, are between the ages of 12. They're between the ages of 12 to 34 years old.
12. That's really young.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I think they have now. I'm wondering if when it first started, it was probably mainly like 20-somethings. That's kind of my guess, but it has gotten younger over the decades. 33% are between ages of 35 to 54 years old, and apparently the remaining 20% are 55 plus, which kind of makes it because my parents do not listen to podcasts. They don't even listen to our show. So now my dad listens to radio a lot, but in terms of podcasting, I have to be like, hey, listen to this part versus doing it on his own free will. He'll only do it because I ask him. Mm-hmm. So. And I can't say about everybody else's 55 plus, but that definitely fits within at least our immediate family. Mm-hmm. Also, in terms of gender, actually, more men listen to podcasts than women, but it's a very small margin. So it's back in 2019, there was 36% of men, 29% of women. And then when you jump to 2022, the most latest here, is 41% of men, 36% of women. So the lines are getting a little more even, but
a lot of people started podcasts in 2020 though. Now, I don't know if they still kept it up, but like that kind of skyrocketed.
2020 was a bit fleeting for ones that did it just because they had nothing else better to do, and then it kind of fizzled out within like a month to a year. But at least this one starts in 2019, so at least there was some already existing things. Now, I will say in 2020 there was a 39% in men and 36 in women, which that's the closest it's been. So yeah, 2020 did change things. But at least to my knowledge, most of the guys I talk to, most of them do listen to podcasts, and a lot of the women I know don't. Mm-hmm. So, but there are more. I feel like it's increasing more because we do have more women that are doing like the self-help mm-hmm. and like more of the creative outlets. Mm-hmm. But in terms of just listening to it to get full information and stuff, that seems to be something that still a lot of guys tend to do.
Well, if they wanted to get caught up, where could they go to?
Oh, thank you, Alan.
Close the gap.
Well, with that perfect segue. Yeah, because after all the statistics, the best way to start, whether you're man or woman, is to check out our podcast, which is the best one out of the 500 or whatever million. It's the only one you
guys need to care about.
It's the only one you need to care about. Out of the whole millions, we are tops. So 201 episodes to binge listen, everybody. You can check us out on doublestuffpod.com. Of course, our newest episodes are always on the most recent of podcast platforms. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Double Stuff Podcast, and of course on Twitter X at Double Stuff P, and that's the letter P.